Both actually coach at Dedham High now.
Yes, we do.
So that's fun. Got reeled into that a little bit, but so I guess kind of the way that I know that this is kind of the more advanced group where you guys, for the most part, are 5th to 8th grade. Is that right? Okay, cool. So I started coaching with the really little guys and then have kind of worked my way up. So right now I coach our 1st and 2nd teams for the 8th graders. I've coached a ton of 5th grade, a ton of 6th grade, a good amount of 7th grade as well. And we kind of all coach everything for Massachusetts. We also actually are both in charge of the Futures program, which is like the really little guys, so that's funny if you have any questions on that stuff or if you want any like fun games for your high schoolers or your middle schoolers to play. They all still love Pac-Man. They still love, what else? Hungry Hippos, all those fun games. But I guess kind of just to get a sense of anything that you guys want to kind of learn, just to give you an idea of who we are. I mean, I play defense. I'm very passionate about defense. So if you have questions on that, I know it's kind of a subject that a lot of people don't get too deep into. I could talk about it for years. It's like one of my favorite things. Sarah is a midfielder. She knows a ton about things like the draw, all of that kind of good stuff. I played a lot of midfield in high school, played a little bit of attack in college, so we kind of have experience around the whole field. But I guess kind of just to start things off, I'm assuming most of you guys are from the South Shore Cape area. Is that kind of accurate? Yeah. So I guess kind of is there anything that you guys, before we kind of go into some of the stuff we want to talk about, that you guys kind of wanted to ask about or kind of get into or were hoping to kind of get out of this session or learn a little bit more about before we get started? Yeah.
Are you going to talk about like drills or positioning or like, I guess maybe can you just give an idea, because if that's what you're going to talk about, I'd love you to talk about defense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Defense for me, girls, women's lacrosse is like the hardest.
For sure.
Position to teach in probably any sport.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's,
because of the 8 and the 12 rule. So any insight you can give on that for teaching?
Yeah, for sure. We have a ton of knowledge on that stuff.
And this is going to be like 7th, 8th grade specific rules. Like, I've never played before.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to play. I've never coached before.
Okay.
I know nothing.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm in advance because of the age group.
No, totally fine. That's cool. Great. Awesome.
I'm looking also for defense, but drills to teach them properly how to check so that teaching them the right way and they're not going to injure someone.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of those too. Yep.
Just if there's any specific new rules this year that we should know about.
Yeah, cool. I will be honest, I'm not super on like knowing a lot about the new year rules for this specific year. But we can give you kind of the rules that are kind of been tried and true that we've had last year and all that stuff.
The big new rule is goalie can leave the crease and come back in.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I got a lot of girls on both ends of the spectrum this year, like a lot of 7th, 8th graders that have been playing since they've been, little.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I don't know how, but now the program has, which is great, like, I think there's like 6 or 8 completely new 7th graders.
Sure.
So I don't want to lose I want to build up these new kids and try to figure out how to get the 7th and 8th grader, the kids that have been working together for a while. Yeah,
for sure. Absolutely. And we have a lot of that at Massachusetts too. So we have, the way that our program works is that we have our top teams. That's usually like, we have probably 2 teams that are, oftentimes they'll trade players. And then we have more of like developmental teams too. So we do a lot of stuff where it's like, okay, here's this drill for this skill level, but we can build on that if there is people that have more skills, that kind of stuff. So I guess if you want to we can start off with defense just to kind of get that going. Something that we really hammer into the kids at a young age, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard it, is the ABCs of defense. So that's approach. Approach is really, if you're thinking about it, if Sarah was like my attacker, this is kind of honestly hard to kind of teach them at first, but if they can get this down, it's really, really big. Because what most kids will do if you're having them approach is Sarah's coming down the line, I'm a defender, I'm just gonna be like, right? And then they're like stuck on the back of their feet. She can blast right by me. She can go anywhere she wants to go. So instead, what we like to teach them is kind of more of a C approach. So if Sarah's over here, all right, can you stand over there? I don't want to run into a chair. If she's coming towards me, I want to kind of give her, like, make it look like she has an angle and that she can go towards that. But as she starts coming towards me, I want to approach and I want to have a see. So see how I don't know if you can see from up there, but the main thing I always tell my kids is wherever your toes are pointing is where you're going to bring your attacker. So if your toes are pointing, if my toes are pointing at Sarah, she's going to beat me every time. I can't slide as fast as she can run, right? Same way in the sense that if she's coming at me and my toes are pointing at her, she's going to be able to run that way faster than I'm going to be able to run that way. So as you're approaching, it's kind of like a little bit of a C as you move. So now by the time I get to her, I'm going completely, and I'm able to force her one way or the other. Does that make sense? So approach is number one, and that's kind of giving them that little bit of extra space. You don't want to approach somebody and just be right on their hip. You want to kind of give them a little bit of space so that you know where to meet them. And then the next one's breakdown. That's kind of that little footwork piece. So as you're coming up, you're approaching, then you're breaking down your feet to get yourself in that kind of defensive position. And C is just contact. So contact's pretty obvious. Body up on the girl. That's one that also, I feel like, I don't know about you, but we kind of have a hard time getting the kids to do, especially when they're younger or they're kind of nervous. They don't want to get a foul. I always tell my kids, I'd rather you get a little foul and learn something from it than you kind of just stand back and let a girl run right towards your net, right?
I feel like oftentimes we find that with like a player who's just starting, going up against a player who's been playing for years. You can tell that you can tell who the good players are, and they're nervous to go up against this player and they kind of just let them get by. But those are the players that they need to go up against to really learn how to make that connection and correctly make that contact against someone who's doing the right body positioning on attack for them to really learn and grasp the ABC concept.
And then I also like to add in, there's ABC, but then I also like to add in D, which is direct. Direct is essentially once you have that contact, you're able to run and move them wide away from the net. It doesn't matter, like I always tell my defenders, like, it doesn't matter if the girl gets to the end line or whatever, or she gets a shot off, you want her to have the worst shot possible. So if you can get her on that wide angle, you can get her just as far away, the worst angle she can get, that's you doing your job and helping your goalie so that they're able to save that ball. Or the girl will just miss the net, it'll be a bad shot in general.
So with contact, do you want lower hand on hip? You don't want to try to keep it from 90-degree angle?
Yeah, so definitely not horizontal, that's a big one. The other thing a lot of kids have problems with, I don't know if you've seen this in the girls you coach, but a lot of times they'll get called for push, even though they'll come off and be like, that wasn't a push. But if their arms come in, and like if I'm on Sarah and my arms come in and then they also come out, I might not be pushing her, my body might be moving away, but to a ref that looks like a push. So we always tell our girls, you want to kind of base towards the hip, and then you're up here with your stick as straight up and down as possible. I mean, obviously a lot of times that means like a 45-degree angle, but the main thing is just the further away from this you can get, the better. And that is also like one of those things you kind of end up playing to your refs sometimes. Like, I mean, some refs let this go a lot. Some refs are really strict about the straight up and down, but we try and tell them like straight on their hips.
So as long as you're not moving your elbows, you can drive them with your legs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You always want to keep those elbows bent.
Right.
So when they approach with those elbows straight, automatically they're going to get it.
So a good offensive move is to step off so their arms go out.
Yeah, it's not. That's why. Yeah, that's why we'll teach stutter step a lot, because the girl will come in, she'll get that contact, and she'll come out, and either it'll look like it could be a push, or the girl will get off her toes, and you'll be able to kind of move around her. Yeah.
So are you always having the butt, or is that just because you are a lefty? You're a lefty, right?
Yeah, I am.
So is that because you're moving the? Do you have the butt always where you're directing them to go, where your toes are going, or is that just because you're a lefty in this? Or do you want?
Do you mean instead of as opposed to going like this?
The stick on,
so
you're both going in that direction, right?
We always are. This is also kind of personal preference. I think a lot of times for coaching, I was always taught, in the way that we often teach it, is your stick downfield, so that if she's coming and I'm here, if her stick's over here, she drops that ball, I'm able to pick it back up and run the direction I want. So if she was going the other way, I would just switch across my body like this.
Okay.
To play D. Some people will switch hands. I personally don't think that makes sense, because if you've ever watched somebody try and pick up a ground ball with their offhand, it's not always pretty. Some people can do it. I'm a little ambidextrous because I'm a lefty. I had to learn all the righty things, but not everyone can really get that switch off. So it's a lot easier if someone's in kind of that like a cross body defense position to pick up a ground ball from here than it is to like switch hands or get that really awkward angle that they're not used to. So that's kind of how we always thought about it, or how I mean, I don't know how you do, but that's how I think about it. But I'm trying to think. Those are ABCDs. Those ones are kind of like the basics that we kind of nail into the kids' heads. It's easy for them to remember. I actually have them like at the end of practice after we do a lot of defense. I'll drill them through it and say like, what's A, what's B, what's C, what's D. Even if they don't like have the footwork, have the contact, they have an idea of like what they're supposed to be doing. And that's stuff that you can practice, like get a partner, we literally have had ones where we'll have a partner and I've actually even done a thing where I'll put like 1, 2, 3 cones and have them run towards the cones and then break down. The other part about the A part of this approach, I would say approach big. So you want to make the defender think that they have the least amount of options as possible. If you're approaching and you're like already like this, she's got a lot more options, or she's going to think she has more options. She's going to see passing lanes. She's going to see things you don't want her to see. So instead, I always have them approach big and then break down their whole body. So not just their feet. So as their feet are getting smaller and breaking down, they're also breaking down and getting a little bit smaller in their body as well. Trying to think.
By focusing on that C shape when they're approaching the attacker, they're also avoiding shooting space. When you go directly at a player, sometimes it's hard to learn. Even like through high school, it's kind of sometimes a tough concept to grasp if you can't really like see it in film or something like that, which obviously you guys probably aren't doing. So oftentimes if you're going in at an angle, you're avoiding shooting space altogether rather than going straight at your attacker and it creating an 8-meter shot.
And then another thing, like kind of on that, the AB part of the ABCs, if you're in the midfield, right, this approach and breakdown gets a little bit bigger because they're coming at you faster. The field's a little bit wider. It's a little different than when you're in that 12 or that 8 meter. So it's kind of like if I was going to give, 3 feet of space to make my C turn, I might get a little bit more on the midfield on the way down because she's going faster. I might need a little bit more time to get my feet going in the right direction. So that's kind of the only little difference there is like you kind of need a little bit bigger of an angle when that's the case because as you're coming down, you want to be able to kind of really have that space to catch up with that girl. If you're a little slow, you can trail her for that check too. Trying to think. That's kind of like the basics of 1v1 defense. The other concepts I feel like you can kind of teach a kid that pretty, get the grasp of that, kind of giving them, just cones to run around, kind of teaching them how to break down their feet. We also just do kind of agility drills where we'll have them run to a cone and they have to break down their feet quickly and then maybe do a slide to another cone or something like that. We've all done those kind of like agility squares to warm the kids up, get them going, get them used to that footwork. But then when you're talking about team defense, I think those concepts sometimes are what really gets lost, especially on the middle school kids, because a lot of that is like, how do I score? How do I, get the ball out? How do I do just my personal job? They don't necessarily have that big team picture yet. And that kind of is a little bit harder of a concept to teach. I don't know, I wish we had a whiteboard. But,
I'll be able to take the paper off that.
is there, I was going to say if it's red. Maybe French. Alright, well.
There, you guys keep talking, I'll try and find you some.
Can you just remind us, is zone allowed or not?
Yeah, we'll get into a zone.
Yeah, zones allowed. Man-to-man obviously is kind of, typically, I would suggest teaching man-to-man first, just because that's going to be kind of your bread and butter for the most part. Zone is like, I'll be honest, out of high school last year, not the best skills program in the world. A lot of good athletes. They had a really hard time in one season grasping that like team defense, how to move, so we taught them a zone just because it was very black and white for them to say like, hey, you stand here. This is your only concern is this space and this job. And then we had a backer to kind of help double. But a lot of times, if you're teaching at this age, you want them to definitely have that man-to-man mentality and understand kind of how to slide, when to double, all that good stuff. Which is a little bit harder when they're a little bit younger. And then hopefully the idea is in high school, their lax IQ gets a little bit better and they can kind of figure out like how they're supposed to be doing all that stuff. It's not working.
Somebody
Somebody use permanent marker.
Honestly, like this.
We can do it on paper. Is there? We'll just use that on paper. Okay. So yeah, I guess the easiest way for me to kind of explain it is just to kind of show you. So if this is a really subpar drawn 12 and an 8, your main typical settled attack is going to be something like what we call a 52. So that's 2 below and then 5 up top. For a defensive portion, obviously you're going to have somebody on all of these attackers, right? For most of the game, if it's a settled balanced attack, you're really just having a little bit of ebb and flow in terms of wherever the ball is. So for my kids, I always teach them heels on the 8 unless you're on ball or unless it's a threat. So on ball, obviously, you want to be right on the girl. So say top girl up here has ball. We want to have this girl's obviously coming out. You don't want them like chasing outside the 12. That's where they're going to get lost. That's where they're going to get into trouble. One dodge or one bad kind of jump at a pass and they're kind of beat. Question?
So heels on the 8, because
Yeah.
last year is this for youth or is this high school too? Because the refs I had said that their heels couldn't be on the 8. But that's just one, you know what?
Yeah. So I mean, I've never heard that before. But basically, the concept is that their back of their heel should be touching the. If the refs are being real technical about weird lines and stuff like that, just kind of coach them to be like, okay, say an inch off of the 8, whatever. But keeping them tight in, because the main point of that is that, say this person drives, if all of our defenders are tighter on that 8, the crash is a lot easier, right? The double's a lot easier. Everything's a lot easier. Attack's main goal when they're trying to kind of work you in a motion or something like that is really to get space for themselves so they can then attack, so they can move the ball, they can cut into it, all that stuff. If you can kind of take away that space or create the illusion that there's no space, that's when things get a lot dicier. And you'll also see, with the middle schoolers, like the second they have a lot of pressure on them, there's definitely a bit of a like freak out unless they're, really good players, which is, also possible for some of them, obviously. But basically, we kind of teach them in towards the 8. If you're on ball, you're on ball. If you're on these kind of 2 spots next to the girl, we call that's the adjacent, obviously. In that case, you can hedge out a little bit, just anticipating that that's obviously the easiest pass for the person to make to move the ball. So if they're hedging out, they might be somewhere a little bit off of the 8 there. And then the natural flow is that, of course, like if this ball gets past here, then this girl pops out, this girl drops back a little bit, that kind of a thing. If the girl goes for a drive, the idea is that the 2 that are a little bit hedged in are able to kind of come in and double depending on where that ball goes. And then there's also that the person next to them would then be the slide who's covering 2 people. So it's kind of like a shift as the ball moves around the field. And then I guess that's kind of the only difference in defense really is on the crease defense. I like to tell my kids you have 2 options. Your first option, the best option, is to keep them below that goal line extended. They're not going to score from back there. There's just no angle, obviously. So we want to keep them below that goal line extended. That you can play a little bit more square because you're really just making sure you're stepping up on that line. If you drop step, let them in, they get in, your next goal is to keep them outside of that 8-meter fan line. I just think it's easier sometimes to physically show them a line on the ground and be like, this is a wall, don't let them go past this. Anything else on team stuff?
Always staying goal side.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing. Of course, goal side. You don't want to be on the opposite side of the girl. That's how they're going to get beat. Also, the biggest thing for team defense, in my mind, is communication. So if, you know, there's no shame in getting beat. I mean, there is at a certain level, but there's no, I always tell my kids, like, there's no, if you get beat, that's fine, like, don't worry about it. Just make sure that we're, you know, you're getting back, you're covering whoever picked up your girl, you're communicating with the team that you need help. I think it's important to kind of have a certain language for your team. You can decide what that looks like for you. Just helps them kind of be on the same page. So for us, it really helps. It helps the girls saying, like, making sure that they say each other's names, like, help left, help right, but I would say, like, hey, Sarah, got you right, got you left, that kind of stuff, just to kind of make sure that they know that they work kind of as a, you know, complete team within that. And so that would be, so like for our teams, we say, like, obviously got ball, these two girls would say I have your help left or your help right, and then these two girls over here would say I have your slide, which just means that, say this girl with the ball drove this way, this defender is going to get that double, and this person has a slide, which means they're covering that those two people that are left behind by the double. Yeah, any questions on that stuff? Like, and then I guess, do you guys teach doubling and that kind of stuff for your typical? Yeah, you do. Okay. So typically for doubling, we just try and teach them it's a V. So, and you try and keep your V kind of as tight as possible. So as the girl draws towards you, if Sarah's my like double person, I'm playing defense, I might call for a double. She's gonna come in and we're gonna try and close that V so she's not able to go. If the girl steps back or something, you're gonna try and stick with her. If that means that there might be a small gap, you're just trying to close it up as much as possible. Typically, you'll say when you're in a double, you stick it, and then once they're out of kind of a more threatening area, you can kind of break up a little bit and get back into that more settled defense. Anything else? Yeah, do you want to do that? Like, I need water.
So man down defense, when obviously if you're a man down, that's when you'll really want to start to, often most of the time, you'll want to drop into a zone. And you'll want to keep all of your players, you want to teach them to stay in their own zone. And we want to make sure, so if every player has their zone, you can kind of almost teach them it as like a pizza. You can stay in your own slice. Here's a slice here, one here, 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 and here. And if you stay in your slice, you're doing a good job. This is where communication is key, and because we want to know who's on ball, who has two. If you have two, you need to really drill into them to communicate that, because that's when things start to break down pretty quickly. Another huge thing when you're a man down is crashing. A lot of times, like Lizzie was talking about, mostly with middle schoolers, when a player comes in for a drive, it starts to be a bit of a freak out. No one does anything and it's kind of silent. And you can really drill into your goalies to yell crash to communicate to your other defenders. Everyone crash into the middle, stop the player, and hopefully we can direct them outwards. Trying to think, anything else on man down?
Hopefully the idea is man down. You're just kind of trying to keep them wide so that there's no goal. You're kind of waiting. That's obviously you're waiting on a yellow card or something. So hopefully it's only for like 2 minutes. Yeah.
Yes.
Man down. I'm coming from the men's game.
Mm-hmm.
So do you guys run like a box and one, or do you run like string?
Or
is it just for when you're running a man down? Is it substantially different, or?
So you can't do a box and one because you can't have somebody in the key.
There's a 3-second rule.
Yeah.
So think basketball.
You
Is
can't,
that, is
yeah.
that the fan?
Yes, the fan.
Okay, yeah.
No,
So-
you're good. So basically what Sarah's saying is, if you have your hashes, we're missing a couple on here. You
Yeah.
have your hashes on your fan, right? And so basically, it's kind of the way, a similar way that you would play a zone defense if you were playing zone. You just kind of switch over to kind of, instead of worrying about your direct person that you've been marking, like I don't have number 3 anymore. I now have this section of space. I'm just trying to keep whoever enters that space away from defend them. So there might be 2 people there. If there's 3 people there, you might be able to kind of have somebody else kind of hedge in towards you a little bit. But the idea is to kind of watch what's going on where you are, know where the goal is, know where the ball is, but kind of see your zone, and then hope that you can kind of run the clock out and defend that way. So like if there's 2 people in my zone, one girl gets the ball, she starts to drive, you're communicating saying, going to net or, gut ball, and then I might say, hey, Sarah, cover, like, see whoever else is in my zone. It's really just thinking about covering that outside, because, you can't hang somebody in the middle, obviously, because there's a 3-second rule. In the zone, sometimes you might put someone in there called the backer, where you have basically that shell, and then you have somebody in there that's really just trying to double the ball the whole time. But that's kind of just if you were doing it without a man down. And then I had something else I wanted to talk about again. A couple just drills to kind of that I found super helpful. For defense, I'll be honest, I could run a whole practice without even having them pick up a stick. A lot of the stuff you learn defensively is not with a stick in your hand. Of course, there's checking. Of course, depending on your level, there's modified checking, there's regular checking. But for the most part, a lot of defense is body position, stick work, and just kind of being disciplined with it. One of the drills that I love to kind of hammer home communication, hammer home some of the just ability to kind of slide and move your feet in the right way, is really kind of just a shell drill. So basically take out these bottom people here, ball can't go below the net. I like to stick my goalie in there just because, I don't know about you, but middle school goalies, sometimes they're like super funky out there. Sometimes they are like mice and they don't talk the whole time. You're kind of like, all right, where's the ball at? Like, who's at the left, who's right, all that good stuff. So I like to stick my goalie in there just for communication purposes. But basically, the kids love this game. It's super fun, but it kind of gets the point across as long as you kind of slow it down for them and have them talk it out first. So 5 people on attack, spread out above. Usually I kind of keep it just a little bit above the 8, just because it's 5v5, a little small-sided. I'll give them a football or like some sort of a small ball, tennis ball, even a lacrosse ball sometimes. We'll also show you how many people don't know how to throw a spiral football. That's what I learned with a lot of these children. But basically, you stick some sort of either a cone or a bucket or something of that sort in the middle. Have the attackers kind of probably more in this space, and then the defenders obviously on them. Really kind of just playing like, I kind of say, if you play basketball, you're in that kind of position. And then let them go. Have them communicate, have them talk about, I like to give them like, hey, do you, I kind of set them up before the game starts and say, okay, if so-and-so has the ball and you're guarding her, what are the people to the left of you saying? What are the people to the right of you saying? Just to kind of make sure that they have that communication. And then let them play, kind of like handball style. Kids love this game. It's a great warm-up. It's a great way to kind of get them in it, get them started. And it honestly, I find that a lot of times it makes kids like defense a lot. I know that that's a challenge a lot of times, is kind of making defense cool. I like to say defense is, if you have siblings, who doesn't like to boss their siblings around? So defense gets to be the boss. Attack like to think they're the boss, but in reality, if you play defense right, you are actually the boss, because you're showing them where they're allowed to go. You're showing them what space to cut into. You get to make sure that they're, going that direction. This also, I feel like, with that kind of contact that we were talking about and how some kids are kind of shy to have that, a lot of times they're less shy when they're doing this stuff because it's more body on body. I mean, my high schoolers love to play it. They're like, I just want to beat people up, which is another thing to kind of deal with. But they have a lot of fun with it. It kind of does take that little bit of that contact issue away. If you're dealing with like beginners, like people are just starting to kind of understand the concept of defense, I like to play a game called, has different names, but I like to call it kind of like a robbers and cops type of a situation, or cops and robbers. The same kind of concept as this. No sticks. One person or a cone, if you want it to be a cone, is kind of the house. One person is, kind of like the cop or the homeowner, or however you want to explain it, and the other person's the robber. And how I like to explain that drill. So basically that would be more of a straight line. 3 cones, put the robber farthest away, cop in the middle, and then the house is that last cone. For younger kids, they love to like stand there and literally like be a house, make it fun, however you want to do it. And basically the idea there is you're really concentrating on those really basic ABCs of defense. Like the robber's coming to your house, right? and I would say to the kids, like, they're coming to your house. Are you going to let them run in? Or do you think like a cop would come over and be like, hey, you're a stranger. Why are you going to this person's house? Like, they're going to approach them. They're going to make contact, all that good stuff. So it's kind of about, you give them a little bit of a lane and tell them they have to stay, within these lines. And 1, 2, 3, as the robber comes, explain to them that obviously if she's the robber, I don't want to be square to her. I want to kind of be a little bit to the side, give her a little angle, show her where she's allowed to go, as opposed to letting her choose if I'm here. And then as she comes in, approach her, break her down. And the goal is to obviously not let them give that third person kind of a high five or get to the house. That one's a really good one if you're like just trying to drill down on the 1v1 defense stuff of like, how do you break your feet down? And you can really kind of see the kids who kind of wheels are turning and they're getting the defensive stuff on those ones. Because some kids will do the thing where they just kind of stand there like this and you're just like, all right, that's wrong. Yeah, those are a couple of ones that I like to do. And then obviously for some of these games, then you can put a stick in there for fun. The other thing we have people do a lot is we'll have them play defense with their sticks upside down. Kind of takes away that concept of a check, which everyone I feel like always looks for, or that kind of like mirroring that I feel like a lot of kids do is like once they get towards the net, they kind of just triangle like this and windshield wiper their way into and sort of cause turnover, but that doesn't typically work out. Anything else for?
A lot of the times we try to make it very important for the defense to focus on the attacker's hips. And a drill that we like to do a lot is sometimes we use like flag football belts, or if you don't have those, you can even use pinnies. Have the attacker put them in the sides of their shorts. And same thing, defense with no sticks, and you just kind of, you can't let them get by without pulling out the two flags or pennies or whatever you use. Again, it makes it really fun for them, makes them want to play defense because they want to be the kid who gets to pull out the flags and all that, but it really shows you which kids can grasp the concept of defense, who needs a little bit of work, and it makes them focus on watching their hips and if they're moving this way or moving this way versus watching their head or looking at their stick when they could just get blown right past.
And a lot of the cool stuff about defense is that I know, like you were talking about having varying levels of kids, right? Every grade's gonna have that. Every grade's gonna have that kid that maybe is super athletic, but they just like, there gets to be a point where it's like, first it's like they're little and they're athletic and they can run around, they can do the things. Then there gets to be a point where it's like stick skills become a really big, like, definer of good and bad a lot of the time. So if you have that newer player who maybe just started in 7th grade and she's super athletic and she gets these concepts, maybe like she plays basketball and soccer and like she knows how to move the way that, which I feel like is pretty common. I mean, that's literally me when I was in high school. I started in 9th grade, so like I had to learn all that stuff. But if they're not confident in that stick part, but they're confident in their defense, this is kind of the stuff, the drills you can do to kind of get them a little bit more excited about that, because there's no stick involved. There's no, you don't have to worry too much about dropping a ball. Like I said, for our high school team, honestly, we're pretty bad stick skills, but like could hold their own on defense because they were able to kind of get their body positioning in the right places to kind of stop the ball. So stuff like that is just kind of stuff to think about. The more you can gamify it, the more you can kind of add something a little bit special or fun, the more they're going to get into the defensive stuff. I mean, we'll even do like 7v7 regular scrimmage with the ball. Offense has sticks and our defense just has to use their feet. Their sticks are flipped upside down, so they're allowed to like a ground ball if it falls, but that's about it. And then I know somebody asked about checking. Checking drills, I don't know, like, depending on what level the kids are at. One of the things that I know often happens with kids checking is like they're running down the field, they're really into it, and they come up and they do like those big hacks where and then you're like, you watch it happen, and you're like, oh no, like they're way up here, they're gonna get called. We do kind of like a lot of times it's muscle memory, so it's like kind of teaching them those quick checks. One of the things we teach them is we'll have them partner up, and one person will just have their arms out straight, the other person will literally just practice that kind of like up-down recoil. That is like, sounds silly, but the more they practice that and get that muscle memory, it seems like you're doing this for like a minute, and it's like, I know right now, I'm like, this seems weird, but just having those like little twitch memories of like, instead of getting used to going all the way down, you're ready to go back up every time, because that is 100% what the ref is looking for. If you come off for a check and you're all the way down to the ground, like, you're going to get called almost every time. So the more they can get that twitch down, the better. So usually we'll start with something like that. Then we'll probably give their partner a stick and let them practice. We typically tell them, you want to aim for these top parts up here. Main point being that that's the most kind of tipping point for any stick. So you want them to kind of aim for that part. For that, we'll even have them literally have their partner hold their stick and cradle and then just drop their stick, let the kid check it, bring their stick back up, let the kid check it. Just kind of getting that. Now you have the muscle memory. Now you have to have that kind of visual memory of like getting that quick check off where I want the ball. I always say that there's the check, the recoil, and the last part is picking up the ground ball. A lot of times you work so hard and then the ball goes down, the kid's like, look at me, I checked the ball, but like they don't pick it up. So I always make sure that, we talk about checking that stick, recoiling, and then picking up the ground ball is their third step. And then the other thing, honestly, other kind of more advanced drills that you can do is trail checking in the midfield. Of course, we try and slow down that midfielder, but it's awesome if you have that attacker that's fast, that's coming downfield to kind of help with that trail check. That I would, we literally will just have somebody will start with the jog, they'll just be coming and they'll kind of intentionally leave that stick and have the girl check it. And then, we can get faster with that. My college coach used to have us do that full field kind of as a punishment, but also was helpful. And it kind of gives you that, if you do it a little bit further out, it kind of gives them that visualization of like when to time it, because timing on checks is really hard. You have to really wait for them to kind of get too comfortable in their run and they hang that stick. So we'll just have them, at the half line, start off just with a jog. The person intentionally hangs it, and then by the end, maybe they're going at a little bit faster of a pace, waiting for that time, and they're hitting that check. I'm trying to think for checking. I feel like that's the main points.
Yeah, just keep it small.
Yeah, small. Checks don't have to be powerful to be effective. Sometimes when you're in the midfield, you might feel like I feel like a lot of kids when they're in that midfield position and they're doing that trail check, they come up way high. You really don't need that. Trickiest checks are kind of those silent but deadly ones where they don't know you're coming and then all of a sudden you're on them and you get that little check off. I always, this is bad probably, but I tell them they make the team look stupid. So if they don't know you're coming, they're going to look a lot dumber. They're not going to have any idea what's happening. And kind of feel you on their back. It kind of gives a break, or gives kind of more of an element of surprise if you can kind of do that a little bit quicker. If you're coming up behind them with your stick up like this, you're definitely getting that call. The other thing I also tell our kids, like for those little kind of muscle memory things, that's something they can practice at home if they just find like a chair, like literally these chairs right here, right in between the armrests. That's a good way to practice that. If you're looking for stuff to kind of send home with them. Other things we have them do at home is kind of that breakdown. We'll tell them to kind of just practice the ABCs on something. It could be, again, a chair. It could be, anything else. Just kind of getting that footwork down is really important. I'm trying to think anything else that, any other questions about anything or anything else that we didn't?
I just have a question. Do you have a site that you recommend that shows visually like these drills in action? Like I know on the MYL they had like younger videos, but I didn't see any for the older.
Yeah, there's a ton on YouTube.
Is there anyone specific though that you suggest?
I'm trying to think for defense drills. It's a little bit harder because it's a lot of team stuff.
Yeah.
I know we have some Massachusetts stuff that we're happy to share. We have like everything drawn out. I can have them kind of send that to you guys too. I think Tracy, our director, would be happy to kind of give you guys that kind of. It's like 13 pages, so like whatever you need, it's probably in there. And we're obviously, we're always around to answer questions and stuff too. We're excited to kind of grow this stuff.
If you want to connect with me before you're done.
Yeah.
The videos the videos, there's 2 cameras. All of this is going to get put up on YouTube, and I'll send, once I get it uploaded, I can send access to everyone in the room, and I'll get that, and I can just.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and she has some stuff drawn out too, so you can kind of see them. Obviously, I know this is a little bit small, but there's some good drills in there too that we haven't even gotten to today as well. I know did
Yeah, so that's hard defense, and then the other thing that I don't really struggle with, but always discuss is the attack in the middies in the attack zone. We lose possession, our attacker on defense, and I want the ball back right there, or in the mid zone, not until it's too late when it's on our 8 or on our 12.
Yep.
So at that point, what I usually do is I take 4 sticks and I make a field on the ground, and because I've got 2 different color balls, I'll pull out 11 balls that are white and 11 balls that are yellow, separate the 2 teams, and we double the ball all the time, every single time, except for when we're organized in the defensive zone in the 8. So when we double the ball, and sometimes we triple the ball, but the 2 furthest opposing players on the other side of the field are irrelevant. So everybody is shifting. So when I say double, I'm not talking to those number 1 and number 2. They're already there. I'm talking to 3, 4, 5, and 6 because I need my 3 to match up with their 2, and my 4 to match up with their 3, because that's where the person who's being doubled wants to go to. They want to exit that ball. So I need to have people on their outlets right away. So whenever I say double, and never ever am I talking about the people that are doubling the ball. When I say double, that's the trigger for number 3, 4, and 5 to slide over, and everybody to slide over on the field.
Yeah, so you want to make sure it's like a shift all the time, and make sure that, most dangerous girl on the field is the one with the ball. The second, probably 1 or 2 are there adjacent. So whoever is the easiest pass for that girl to make, you want to make sure that you have somebody on them. On the redefending, I always tell, because I feel like sometimes you see attackers, and especially when they're younger, and they're like, I am an attacker. I am here to score goals. I am here to move the ball. That is my only job. Once that's done, I'm just going to stand here, and that's it. I like to tell my kids, you are a terrible teammate if that's your mentality. Lacrosse is a team sport. If you don't want to play team sport, that's okay. But this is the whole point of it. You're playing all the way to that end line. So if you're those top 2 attackers and the ball gets turned over, or you take a shot and the goal gets saved, it's your job. Your number 1 job now is to try and get that ball back and try and double that ball. If you're leaving up to the midfielders, basically what happens is a chain reaction. So if your middies are kind of that first kind of person on the ball, if it's low, then your defenders have to kind of shift up a little bit to get that next layer of people that they're defending. Then you're left with, you could be left with even a 3v1 by the end of it, because everyone's shifted the wrong way. So it's really important that you get those 4 attackers to understand the concept of wherever ball is, and wherever ball is, we're doubling that ball. If you're not doubling that ball, if you can't hang, that's not your thing, you shouldn't be playing attack. You should you gotta figure out a way to bust your butt a little bit more. In the midfield part, it's obviously a little bit more spread out oftentimes. So in that point, there's also 2 different ways to go about it. You can cover a zone, or you can cover man-to-man. So it also kind of depends on who you're playing. A lot of times in a ride, you do a zone just because the ball moves a lot faster in the air than it does on the ground. So if they're good at passing, you want to kind of make sure that your areas are covered, so that there's enough, if you see the ball coming into your zone, you're able to kind of pop in, intercept it, go to that girl and move.
I can just speak for our town, but we have so many girls that have never played lacrosse that I don't even think it's a matter of laziness or know it.
A lack of understanding.
Understand that if I'm an attacker, I'm redefending. So I think, and I'm speaking for my town, but I think it's, these girls are just learning the game. So it's very overwhelming when the ball goes down and they're attackers to think oh, I have to redefend or I have to double. So I think it is, I coach high school, so I think youth is completely different. I think it's much harder to coach youth because a lot of these girls don't have the experience. So I think, being very patient with the fact that, a lot of these girls are just learning the rules, and in lacrosse, the rules change.
All the time.
Yeah.
Or don't have that aggressive aspect yet, right? Sometimes 5th graders, they don't know what competition fully is at that point in time, right? So that's why we also, we'll do drills for that too, clearing drills where, the game is literally wherever the ball goes, 2 people go on them, just to kind of get them that concept. Or we'll even start off with, I'm an attacker, I just shot the ball, or, just to make it easier, I passed the goalie. Goalie now has to clear, and now the name of the game is who can get to the ball fastest, things like that, just to kind of teach them that habit and that muscle. A lot of stuff is muscle memory when it comes to the middle schoolers, is like, how do we get these kids to do the same thing over and over again the right way? Some of them will have weird habits. I know from speaking for my town, a lot of people played boys lacrosse first when they came to girls lacrosse. We even still get like third graders that come in with boy sticks, and like it's adorable and it helps them get confidence in passing and catching, but like we do need to have them switch over at some point because it's definitely a different way of catching a ball. I know the men in the room, I'm sure you've caught with a men's stick and then tried to throw and catch with a girl's stick. It's a lot different. I know my boyfriend struggles with that. It's really funny to actually watch him. Makes me feel athletic. But yeah, so that's kind of just like some of the different things there. The main thing I think with the younger kids is like, make it fun, make it a game, try and make it like as repetitive but less boring as possible. So there's a lot of ways you can teach these same skills, but like add in flags from flag football and make them, instead of kind of getting on the hip with their stick, now you have to grab a flag off of the stick or off of the hip. Just kind of little things that are going to teach them those aspects and kind of helping them move a little bit forward. And then once you get those kids that are really good and they're in 8th grade and they have the understanding and all that stuff, then you can kind of be like, yo, this is where we're at, and you got to kind of understand. And a lot of the kids, honestly, like some kids aren't going to get that lax IQ stuff until they're in high school and college and they're seeing it, on a film, or they get really into it and they really want to learn. They're watching BC play Syracuse. They're watching UNC play. Like that's when they're going to start really getting some of those bigger concepts. But the best stuff that we can do is just give them that kind of really good baseline of, muscle memory. How do I check? How do I move my feet the right way? What are some good concepts? How do I communicate? Communication for little kids is definitely, I think, the biggest challenge. They get kind of quiet. If they don't know what they're doing, they'll kind of be really quiet and just kind of sit there and say like, they'll be like, oh, everyone knows when they got ball, but they don't really know what to do after they have ball. So that's even like, I will even have drills where like, they'll stand in a circle and we'll pass the ball in a circle. And if Sarah has ball, like I'll say what I'll say what I'm supposed to say, and that's pretty much it. Or even warm up like that. I mean, honestly, my college team even used to do that. We used to just start off and do a shell drill, and the shell was literally the outside people were passing. Sometimes it was imaginary ball, and we were popping out, popping in, like just getting them in that mentality of like, what's your job? How do you do your job the best? And how do you defense? I think for me, I'm really like sappy about it. I'm like, these are your people. Defense doesn't get a ton of recognition. You're not going to get a million awards all the time. But if you do your job right, then you should only have to do it for a very short amount of time and work really hard for that short amount of time. And then your team will end up shining. I like to say they're kind of like, you're like the match that lights the fire. So as soon as that kind of goes up, if defense is solid, if defense is good and they're talking and they're loud and they like are a unit, that's going to spill over to attack. They're going to get those cause turnovers. They're going to get that ball back. The attack's going to want to work to make sure they take care of it because defense just works so hard. Or that's the hope anyway. That's what it ends up being. Hopefully when they get a little bit older, when they're younger, it's just kind of how do we get them to understand the concepts and do them repeatedly. So yeah, I don't know what time this ends at, but I have no idea. But any other questions on that stuff? I don't want to go too far. Are we over? I don't know what time it is. Is there any other kind of questions or anything, I guess, at this point, just to kind of... No? Cool. Awesome. I think that's it, right? I think we went over. I'm very warm, so I don't know. It's very